The way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs our world is that He's a Kel Mistater. He's a hidden God. Does not reveal Himself publicly. In a larger sense, is something that we would refer to as tzimtzum, as limitation. By definition, HaKadosh Baruch Hu fills everything and should be the most galoi thing in the world. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu actively chooses to hide Himself. And that parallels what happened in the very beginning of creation, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu did everything. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to carve out for Himself, and we've spoken about this in the past, He had to ki'ilu, whatever this means, carve out a space that was empty of His direct, overpowering presence, in order to leave room for the creation of the world, in order to leave room where our physical world can exist. Sometimes, by removing a great force, it actually allows things to develop. The mashal that I saw brought down is that close, and this is obviously only lahavdil, but if a person is very, very close with a very great chashav rav, and the person is very, very holy and very, 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 very deep, and so it's very hard to be in their presence 24 hours a day, because you can't just sit down and just chill out. You can't relax, and in fact, you're even sometimes dumbstruck. You can't even speak. You're scared to open your mouth because the person is so intelligent. Person, you feel that maybe anything you say is going to be foolish. Person can sometimes have that feeling. And therefore, sometimes it's valuable to have distance in order to be able to develop. Sometimes when the Rebbe or the parent is too overburdening, overprotective, or too present, so it doesn't allow development. It doesn't allow a person to develop in the way that doesn't allow existence, but it certainly doesn't allow development. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes a step back in creation in order to allow us to operate and to live independently. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was here in our faces every second, and His presence was so perceptible that we couldn't deny that God existed, so we would all be a bunch of robots. We would sit here, and we wouldn't even have a chance to think about what do I want. By HaKadosh Baruch Hu stepping out of the picture, it leaves room for me. I. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was standing here with His lightning rod, and you knew that every time you did anything wrong, He would zap you, so we would not be able to do anything. We wouldn't be able to think for ourselves. We wouldn't be able to behave well, we wouldn't be able to have badly. Everything would just be proper behavior, and we wouldn't be able to do anything. We'd be robots. And perhaps that's what it's like in Shemayim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His malachim, who don't have bechira, because they recognize every second the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the malachim. And they don't have a moment of forgetfulness or a moment of a lack of consciousness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu did a tremendous tova to us, and that is that He removes Himself from the world in a bolate, in a way that He doesn't remove Himself from the world, but He removes Himself in an fashion that we're not able to sense His presence. It's not palpable. It's not something that we could touch, and that allows room for us to act independently. But it also allows us to grow, and it also, obviously, most importantly, as the Ramchal speaks about so often, it gives us the room for bechira. And if you don't have an opportunity for bechira, so a person can't be rewarded, and a person can't accomplish, because you're not making any decisions for yourself. And we have to follow the derech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we're parents, when we're teachers, we have to recognize that we have to sometimes give people room. I could call every one of you every morning and say, get to the shachris right now, child's bed, and command everything you want them to do. But as all of you know, that does not create fertile ground for proper development, because people need independence in order to develop properly. Certainly our mission as a nation, however, is to seek out God hidden in our world and to reveal Him. And our job are to be ambassadors, and I've used this expression before, ambassadors of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, and to bring His message and reveal Him in this world. So there is a pattern or a process that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in this world, and that is that Hashem created in this world, and that is that Hashem created the world, and as soon as He created the world, He plunged the world into a downward spiraling movement. And the world went down and went down and went up, proliferated. Sin spread across the face of the earth. And the purpose of going down, 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 and hiding Hashem and hiding Hashem and hiding Hashem was so that one day the process can revert itself, and there would be a great Gilui of revert itself, and there would be a great Gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In order for Klal Yisrael to have this mission to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, and the Avos already started to do that on an individual level, and that's something we spoke about in previous weeks. The Avos lived in a world where HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Kel Shakai in nature. Shakai is Milashon die, as Chazal tell us. She'omar li'olamo die. That He created the world, and at a certain point He said stop. But that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu behind the mask of nature. And the Avos sought to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu within that world. And Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed in the world. And Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed in last week's Parsha that we're going to now begin the process of Yud Kei Vav Kei, of the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Mlo'o, completely, fully. In order for us as a nation to do that, we had to start from the plunged into the place that was the most void of any recognition of who HaKadosh Baruch Hu was. The greatest atheistic culture ever to walk the face of this earth, to exist in this world, was Egypt. Paro triumphantly and egotistically proclaims to Moshe Rabbeinu, Mi Hashem! Who is this Hashem you're talking about that I should listen to him? I don't know any Hashem. In fact, Chazal tell us, it's really basically, V'ani asitani, says Paro. The Nile is mine. I created. I'm the creator, says Paro. Paro really believes that he thinks he created the Nile River. Soloveitchik confront the fact that he's mortal and he's going to die. If you sit and think about it for a second, that you are going to die, so that's a pretty trippy thought. That's a pretty depressing thought. It's a pretty crazy thought. It's what he calls an absurd thought. That I'm living this life realizing that I'm going to die like everybody else does. So how does this man respond to the fact that he's going to die? So some men deny it, and they try to live a life where they ignore it, and they pretend it's not going to happen. And others create themselves into monsters and try to create within themselves or believe a belief that they're greater than life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hid Himself in the world. And there are some people that see a world without an overt and obvious God, and their response is, they take it and they run with it. I don't see a God, so there is no God. Others realize that when you have a world that doesn't seem at first glance to have a God, it just means you have to look a little harder. You have to see and look and probe the world to find the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. An atheistic society is one that says, I don't see God, and there is no God. And what results from an atheistic society? If there are no rules, if there is no God, chaos. So there's chaos, there's anarchy, because ani asitani, I make the rules. There's no greater force that's making rules. Li ya'ori v'ani asitani. This was the mahalach of Paro. Paro said there is no God, and therefore I'm in control. And when I'm in control, so then anything can happen, because there are no more rules. Even the climate of Mitzrayim was built in a way by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it lended itself to this kfira. As we know, unlike Eretz Yisrael, where you need to daven every day for rain, because if you don't have rain, you will not survive. The Nile was will not survive. The Nile was the Egypt was supported by the Nile, and therefore the Nile River. You don't need rain in Egypt because the Nile River is filled with water and it overflows the banks, and everything comes from the Nile. And therefore, that engendered that same attitude. We don't need God. Rain is sustenance from heaven. Right? Like if someone says, like, well, where's it going to come from? What? Money's just going to fall from the sky? That's how you say, like, what? God's just going to give me money? And sure enough, the number one important thing that a person needs to live is water. Where does water come from? It mamish falls from the heavens. Think of that. It's such a miracle. It mamish falls from the heavens. Think of that. It's such a miracle. If I would tell a kid, oh, we're going to make some money this year. We're going to go outside and it's going to fall from heaven. So you say, that's crazy. And yet it's not so crazy. Water falls from heaven. It's where it comes from. It comes from heaven. But not in Egypt. So in Egypt, arse that you support yourself. Li Ori. I have the Nile. Now it's funny, because obviously the water in the Nile came from somewhere, but they don't ask that question. Once they have an answer to the immediate thing that they're looking at, doesn't matter what's behind that. Okay, you know how the world came? It wasn't created. Matter what's behind that. Okay, you know how the world came? It wasn't created by God. It was this Big Bang. Okay, well, who did the Big Bang? So that question's not asked. All the stuff that got condensed in that one spot in order to bang and create all of our world, how'd that all get there? Who put that there? Now, that question we don't ask. Well, we're okay. Why does that help? So you didn't know how the world was created. Okay, now you've decided that the Big Bang created the world. So now you're okay. What do you mean now you're okay? Who created the Big Bang? Where did the Big Bang come from? But Paro, the Paro perspective, the Egypt perspective, doesn't look at that. That just says, we don't need rain, we have a Nile. So we're okay. It says, we don't need rain, we have a Nile. So we're okay. Really, where'd the water in the Nile come from? No, that question we don't ask. Leo Rivani Asitari, it's a little crazy. Paro, you created the Nile? Paro really thinks he created the Nile? What, he has a childhood memory of that? There used to just be like a tract of land here that had no water. And I woke up one morning and I stopped. Obviously knows the truth. He knows he didn't create the Nile. But who isn't like that in the world? Look around at the culture around us. Everybody thinks they're not going to die, but they don't really believe they're going to die. But everybody walks around with, there are no rules. I make my own rules. You're going to tell me what to eat and what to look at and what to touch. You're going to tell me what to eat and what to look at and what to touch and what to do? Who the heck are you, God? I don't know no God. Leori, I run the show around here. There was a famous atheist who passed away a few years ago and died of an illness. But before he died of his illness, he was a very big loud. He was a funny guy also. People enjoyed listening to him. And he used to shoot his mouth off all the time about his atheism and about how God is cruel and there is no God. He was a famous atheist. And sure enough, if you look into his personal life, he was a tremendous alcoholic apparently. He smoked and drank. Now, I'm not here to get into his own personal life, and I'm not here to make comments about why people drink and why people smoke. But it certainly makes sense. If you live a life where you deny God, so what are you living for? Especially for modern day atheists, that we're just this tiny little speck, we're absolutely worthless. We're just like we're like a blip on a radar screen, on a huge screen. We're a tiny little blip, our whole universe. Kal v'chomer, each individual person. So why not just drink and smoke and throw your life away? Because what's the purpose of life anyway? You see, in Mitzrayim it was even more complicated. Because in Mitzrayim not only did they have the Nile and therefore they were self-sufficient, they also had control over the metaphysical realm. Have you ever met anyone who could turn a stick into a snake? And then a snake into a stick? They apparently were able to bring the Tzifardea. They were able apparently to cause Makas Dam. They had control over the spiritual realm as well. That's not so crazy. Back then, they were much more knowledgeable in the spiritual realm. And just like in the physical realm, If I told you that I could lift myself a 500-pound rock, you wouldn't believe me. But then once I show you a pulley system, and I show you how with a pulley system I can just pull not even so hard, I can lift up a 500-pound rock, you'd say, whoa! You'd say, whoa, magic! It's not magic. Once you know the system, once you know the rules, it's not magic to be able to do things. So they had control not only over the physical realm, not only did they know how to pick things up, right, we're all pretty self-sufficient. We don't feel like we need God every second. I'm able to wake up in the morning seemingly and go about my life without God. So even more so, a person thinks, Li Ori Vani Asitani, I'm in control here. And that was where Klal Yisrael had to be sent. We had to be sent into a culture that was the ultimate atheistic culture. There is no God, we run everything. Much like the cultures we find ourselves in. Now, every loudmouth in the world, shooting his mouth off about how he's in control of his whole life, God doesn't have any role to do, God is dead, God is evil, He brings nothing to existence. And the job of Klal Yisrael is to go down into that culture, into that atheistic culture, and to bring a different message. Atheistic culture, and to bring a different message. The mitzvah that we get in this week's Parsha is the mitzvah that the Torah should have began with, because it is the defining characteristic of Klal Yisrael. It is our raison d'etre, our reason for existence. HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. Rashi famously says at the beginning of the Torah, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. Why does the Torah then start with Bereshis? Why do we start with, and when we say Bereshis, what's Bereshis? Bereshis is the entire downward spiral from creation, down, down, until we find ourselves in the depths of Mitzrayim, in the Meitzarim, in the enclosement that was Mitzrayim. Why do we need all of that? Why can't we just start with HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim? Says Rashi, from Chazal, Amar V'yilahem Nachlas Goyim, to give us the Nachlas Goyim. So what does that mean? And why is HaChodesh hazeh lachem so significant? There are two systems in the world. There's Shanim, Shana, and there's Chodesh, Chadashim. We count the year, and there's Chodesh, Chadashim. We count the year with two different countings. We've got years and months. The year is broken up into months. But we've got a yearly cycle and a monthly cycle. The yearly cycle is based on the sun. Moon. Shana and Chodesh. The system of Shana is 365 days. The Chodesh is 29.5 days. That's why some months are 29 days, some months are 30 days. It's 29.5. It's 29.5. This is the cycle of the moon. What does the sun represent? The sun as the representative of the system that we call Shana. The sun is the paradigm of Timidius, of consistency. And the sun sets. And you can bet on that happening every single day. The sun rises and the sun sets. When Koheles wants to make a reference to the rat race of life, when he wants to make a reference to the regularity, the habituation that occurs in regular life, what does Koheles say? What does he write? Tachas Hashemesh. Ein chadash tachas Hashemesh. There's nothing new under the reign of the sun, because the sun represents Shana. The sun represents the consistency, the regularity system, and that's the system of the Chodesh. And Chodesh comes from the word Chiddush, newness. And in fact, the moon, very unlike the sun, the moon is never the same 2 nights in a row. It waxes, it wanes, it gets bigger, it gets smaller. I recognize that the moon itself does not actually get bigger, it gets smaller. But from the perspective of man, the moon gets bigger and it gets smaller.
Your dad always knows where it is.
That's right, very good. And this is a competing system. The system of Shana represents regularity, it represents Teva, it represents nature. And the system of the Chodesh of the moon represents recreation. It represents ingenuity. It represents chiddush, something new, a newness. When Paro, when Mitzrayim, when the atheists of the world look at our physical world, they only see Shana. They see sun. They see Teva. They see regularity. They don't see anything behind it. And yet when we look at the sun, we're supposed to realize chidush. You come in each day, and we assume each minute I'm going to breathe in a minute from now, just like I am now, because of inertia. Because why? I am breathing now. Why wouldn't I breathe in the... Right now there's a system of gravity in the world, and therefore when I drop this, it falls down. Why wouldn't there be in a minute from now? And yet we say in davening that Kadosh Baruch Hu is mechadish b'chol yom tamid. He recreates every single moment. Which means that every single second, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing, not that he's willing like he's willing to do it. He wills. He wants. He proclaims. He desires every minute that there should be a system of gravity. Right? I remember, right? We gave this mashal the other day. So as I'm doing this, you realize that every single second I am willing to spin my arm right now. I'm willing this right now. You're scratching your hair, you're watching something. How could you say that you're willing this right now? But you all know I'm willing this. I want this to happen, and right now my brain is telling my arm to do this. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and yes, even though I was doing it a second ago, I could stop and then pick up a second later. That, just like I can second later, that, just like I can do that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that with the entire Bria. Every moment is new. Right now, at 2017, February, whatever it is. I don't even know what the date is. What's the date? February 3rd, February 4th, whatever it is. We're sitting here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tavshin Ayin Zayin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sitting here this second and willing every one of you to continue to exist. And He's willing gravity to exist. And He's willing that the skies should stay where they are with the properties that they have. And it's hard to see that. Because a second ago there was skies and there was gravity. And a second ago there was skies and there was gravity. And a second before that, and that's what Paro says. Paro says, I don't care. There's no rain behind this Nile. It's always been like this. This is Shana. This is the perspective of the year. The sun rises, the sun sets. Change. And Klal Yisrael, because we are Nimshalo Levana, our mitzvah is HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. We have to live with a perspective not of Shana, of Chodesh. Check it. What's the gematria of Shana?
Chadash.
Paro. Paro is 350. Paro is 355. That's right. Paro is the gematria of Shana. Because Paro represents the perspective of Shana. The representative of, he represents that perspective. The perspective of Mitzrayim. And you're trapped by it. We call Mitzrayim the base of. And how many people walk through the world and they look at nature, all they see is Shana. They don't see the Chadash. They don't see the moon. I think it's significant that the moon, many times even during the day, the moon is out, but you just can't see it. Why? Because the sun is so darn blinding. So you can't even see the moon. The moon's in the sky! So you can't even see the moon. The moon's in the sky! It's only when the sun goes under the earth and we're not able to see the sun that we're able to finally see the moon. And that's because the sunlight is blinding. This world is blinding. It's an olam of sheker. And it looks like it runs on its own. The message is to introduce to the world HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. The world was created with Asara Mamaros, and Torah, which is our key to HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim, was given over with 10 dibros. And it's obvious that the 10 dibros and the 10 ma'amaros are connected each other. In fact, the Svarim point out that the uniting 10 that united between the Asar Ma'amaros of Bereshis and the Aseres Hadibros of Torah were the Eser Makos in Mitzrayim. The Eser Makos in Mitzrayim. Rav Moshe Shapiro explains that Bereshis is the first. I mean, that's Chazal tell us. That's the Gemara tells us that even though the way we count the 10 Ma'amaros, if you count the word Vayomer and Bereshis, there's only 9 of them. But the 10th one is Bereshis. Bereshis was the first. But the reason why it's not preceded with a Vayomer is because there was nothing yet. Vayomer is when I speak to someone, I say Vayomer. I speak to. Vayomer, speech, is a way that you interact with something. And therefore the first mimer couldn't say Vayomer because there was nothing yet. So Bereshis was the creation of the entity that can then receive the other 9 Vayomers. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing with the Dibros. The first Dibra is not a creation. It's not a commandment. What's the first of the Dibros? Anochi. And then you have 9 commandments. Isn't that strange? What's the first commandment? So it's a machlokas. Is the first Dibra is Anochi a commandment? The Rambam counts it as a mitzvah. The Bahag doesn't count it as a mitzvah. The Ramban says in the Parish on the Rambam, how can it be a mitzvah? It creates the whole system. If you don't have God, you don't believe in God, so how can you say, oh, you're honoring your parents and don't murder, you can't kill, you can't have adultery. None of those things mean anything. If you don't believe in Congress, there are no laws. So a policeman's going to pull you over and you say, what do you mean? I don't believe in the American government, so how can you pull me over? There are no laws. What gives the law any credence? So Anochi is necessary in the beginning of the Dibros in order to create something that there could be commandments. Same thing with Bereshis. Bereshis was necessary to create a world, and therefore Hashem could then create in that world trees and plants and water and animals and people. So Bereshis is Keneged Anochi. Rav Moshe Shapiro explained based on Svarim, that the Makos are flipped with the Asara Ma'amaros of the world. That while we start with the big Bereshis, the big bang, the big Bereshis, the Makos end. They build themselves up. Keneged Bereshis. And Vayihi Or is Keneged Choshech. So Bereshis introduced into the world Teva. That was what Bereshis, the Ma'amaros, the Asara Ma'amaros, brought our world Teva. It brought us our world Teva. It brought us Shana. Bereshis brought us Teva. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hidden in the world. And therefore, what does it say in the Pasuk? Bereshis bara, who? Elokim. Why Elokim? Because Elokim is the name of God when He's hidden. Elokim doesn't really mean justice. It means distance. Elokim is distance. And therefore, Bereshis bara Elokim, because creation started a process that hides God. And the Aseres HaDivros start with what words? It's tremendous. Aseres HaDivros start with what words? It's tremendous. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Let me introduce myself. I'm here. Anochi Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei, the revealed God. I'm your God. I'm not some, which leaves room for all the egotistical atheists to run around the world and to say, I don't see no God, I don't know any God, I don't know any Yud Kei Vav Kei, says Paro. Leo Rivani Asitani. Mi Hashem Asher Yishma Bekolo. Who is Hashem that I should listen to Him? I don't know Yud Kei Vav Kei. I only know a world that's predicated on Elokim, which means that there is. I only know a world that's predicated on Elokim, which means that there is no God, because He's hidden, and I haven't decided to look for Him. Comes along the Aseres HaDibros, and the Aseres HaDibros introduce a new world order. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's the reason why gracious. To give us Nachlas Goyim. What's the Nachlas Goyim? It doesn't mean necessarily the land of the Goyim. Nachlas, the inheritance of the Goyim. What does it mean? Hashem started with Bereshis to realize that the story doesn't start with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim. It starts with going down into Mitzrayim. And all of the kfira and all the atheism, and then Hashem says, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim, you will reign over that. I didn't create a world only with a moon, there's a sun. And the beauty and the mission of Klal Yisrael is to be able to rule over the sun, Hashemesh, but to live me'al Hashemesh. to rule over the Shemesh, to rule over the Shana. Yes, you need to be ma'aber the Shana in order that it works out with the lunar cycle. Because the lunar cycle is the one that takes precedence. Because it's all about the idea of Klal Yisrael, the mission of Klal Yisrael, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu started the Torah with Bereshis to show us that we have a mission here. It's not just to recognize HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, but to rule over the Nachlas Goyim, to rule over the perspective of Shana, the perspective of the Umas Ha'olam, who only see Teva. There's a huge talich here. There's a process where the world is plunged into darkness, but the goal is that we should emerge with great light, and that light will be able to rule over the darkness. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is no saying HaKadosh Baruch to Klal Yisrael, the Nachlas Goyim. Hashem should give all of us the ability that we should be able to connect to that we should be able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu hidden in our world, over the world of Teva, to recognize that everything we see, everything that we experience in life is really saturated with Elokus, it's saturated with the presence